Hey, y'all, welcome back to the Don't Mom Alone podcast. I'm your host, Heather McFadden, and this is the place where I get to walk alongside you and connect you with people and resources so you know that you don't mom alone. And in today's episode, number 486, I'm welcoming Stephanie Cohen to the show.
And gestures really are a way that babies can indicate, oh, I'm starting to understand that we're sharing an experience together and we're thinking about the same thing. So when your baby starts to point, maybe they point at a dog running by and your baby is indicating, I understand that if I point to that dog, because it's so cute and I'm excited, that you're going to look and we're going to share attention around, what we see or something that we do.
Some of you may or may not know that in a past life, prior to podcasting, I was a speech language pathologist. And so it made my heart so happy to have this fantastic conversation with Stephanie Cohen about speech and language development. We talk about eating, talking, verbal cues, nonverbal cues, and is my kid on track? Are they developing normally? When do I need to get intervention? And more than anything, I wanted to connect you with Stephanie and her amazing website, Learn to Talk with Me, her YouTube channel of the same name, her Instagram account, because she will continue to support you if you are in that stage of wanting to help navigate this amazing process your child goes through in communicating with you. And whether you have young kids or you don't, I think it's fascinating. If you know someone who's having little kids, definitely check out all of her books. She has thought through how to introduce language to kids and to interact with them through these books. And we've linked to all of them in the show notes. If you have a kid going off to college, please check out in the show notes a link to her husband's Instagram account and listen for my surprise in realizing that they were married, because I have saved some of his videos as I've launched a kid to college. Such a great conversation. Let's get right to it. Here we go. Oh my goodness, y'all. It's been 10 years of the podcast, almost 11 this fall, and I haven't really done an episode dedicated to early speech language development, and that's what I got my degree in. Until this amazing Stephanie crossed my email path, and I was like, yes, we're doing this. She is a great resource for y'all because she has oodles of videos and books for you as moms and dads in this early stage of speech language development. And when you have all these questions and you're like, who do I go to without waiting on a wait list forever? In the meantime, Stephanie's your girl. So welcome to the show, Stephanie.
Thank you. And I'm so happy to try and be that resource. You're exactly on target. That's exactly what I'm trying to do.
Well, you're nailing it. Every video I was like, yes, yes. And then I realized we went to the same graduate program.
We did.
We're just talking it through. And at first I thought we graduated at the same time. Then I remembered September 11th. Oh yeah, that's when I started. You had just graduated. We just missed each other.
We just missed each other, but we know all the same people and have a lot of similar fond memories.
And probably the same kind of background of learning about 0 to 3 development. When I say 0 to 3, I mean 0 birth to 3 years old. And we have the same favorite professor in feeding, infant feeding, and child feeding. So we're going to have a good conversation. Yes. Shout out, Barb. You are amazing. So if you ever listen, 2 of your students here having a little chat. But I know that when you get this baby, you love this baby, and you want eventually for them to say, mama, dada,
yes,
communicate. And neurology is amazing. The system is amazing. And eventually they do start communicating most of the time.
Yes, most of the time.
There are people that will see us, and whether there's a condition causing that not to happen or a delay, they need a little support. So tell me your journey. Like, what have you been up to? What was your process to getting on TikTok? I mean, kind of the short version.
It was not an expected or planned stop on the journey, but has turned out to be so rewarding and fun, actually. So after I graduated from graduate school, I had some experience in a few different settings working with families in an outpatient clinic where they would come to see us, and then transitioning to a hospital where I would see kids that were recovering from different things, and then also see parents and families on an outpatient basis. And then I had my own children and began to see families in their homes through early intervention. And so if your listeners are unfamiliar with early intervention, it is a grant funded federal program that exists in every state and territory that offers services and support in the natural environment. So it could be the family's home, it could be a daycare, it could be anywhere that that child is really spending their time. And whoa, did my perspective shift. We were just talking about how when I made that transition, I began to understand how all encompassing, the concerns parents have really are. And I do a lot of support of kids also with feeding challenges, which is so enmeshed in just the relationship with the caregivers that are eating with them. And so that is just a huge part of my practice. And one of the things that's really distressing to me is how long the wait times are for support.
Yeah. Yeah.
So as I was meeting families and just wanting to help more families and, having to have a wait list and things like that of my own, I decided, could there be a way that I could offer resources in an ethical and responsible way, right? Because you and I know from our training and just from being parents, you can't completely answer a question in a 30-second video on TikTok. But what I hope comes through is just little pieces of information that help parents know what to expect, that help them decrease their stress just a little bit. And like you, point them to resources where they can learn more.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it.
Yeah. I mean, Stephanie's so sweet and was listening to some of our episodes we just had on with Carissa redo of that episode about regulation and co-regulation. And maybe let's even talk about that. Like, why does that matter? Why would what I shared about emotions have anything to do with feeding and speech and language?
Oh my gosh. It's because it's the starting place. The emotions and the emotions that are wrapped up in the experiences that children and parents and families have had together.
Mhm.
That is really the starting place for my work. So if I'm thinking about feeding, for example, or learning to eat as infants learn to eat, that really happens in the context of the relationship. If you kind of think about early days, for those of your listeners who do have children and remember those early days, if things went well, those feeding times were a time of connection and comfort and sharing love and learning each other. And if those times didn't go well, if they were stressful, then those times become repeated stressful experiences, especially if really hard things have happened. It can even become traumatic. And so I always think about emotions and self regulation and co regulation because my job is to support the parents in first being able to understand their child and their child's experience.
Mm.
Um, and then help parents reflect on their own emotions so that they can better support their child to feel safe, to feel comfortable, to feel confident, and to feel a sense of trust every time they come to the table, so to speak. Or if we're talking about communication, just like feeling like, wow, my parent is somebody who understands how I'm feeling in this situation. And when I feel scared and when I feel stressed, they see that and they understand that, and they don't just tell me to, or they don't just tell me that I'm okay, but instead they are that secure base of support. So the work you do sharing about emotional regulation for adults and children, I think is the starting point for all of the work that we do as practitioners in early intervention. It's really starting with that relationship.
Yeah. I mean, it makes sense to me. One, let's dial back to those early days. You're a new mom. You've never done this before. And I remember feeling so much pressure, and I had had all this training. My baby had so much reflux and was
Wow.
losing so much milk. It seemed like, oh my goodness, they just threw up. He just threw up everything I fed him, and he's losing weight. It's all those fears. I'm not enough, the shame, what's wrong with me that it's easy for that mom and it's hard for me. And it's like, I could see how that buildup of guilt, shame, I mean, not real guilt, false guilt, shame, fear that they're going to lose weight, that they're not going to thrive, actually then causes that disconnect in relationship. And so if you're that mom right now and you are feeling all those things, whether you're attempting breastfeeding and it's not something that you're finding is a match for you, freedom. We have episodes on that. I've got those episodes you can find in the show notes. And then if you're just, your child is more of a selective eater and you're feeling that stress, like, don't you find even as you start presenting foods, there can be, so how does a mom show up in the selective eating stages, you know?
Yeah. There are, again, so many emotions around that. And one of the things that I talk about a lot when I'm teaching, and I've shared this on TikTok and Instagram as well, and YouTube, is that, with infants, they eat 8 to 12 times a day. Toddlers eat 5 to 7 times a day. So if you are struggling, if you are worried about your child, about their growth and their health, and then you're maybe encountering some pressure from well-meaning professionals that tell you how much you have to get into your child or which foods are good and bad, quote unquote. If you're listening, you can't see my air quotes, but I don't use those terms. But certainly in our culture,
Yeah.
we are flooded with value-based information about foods. And so that just adds to our stress. This is, as I said earlier, an all-encompassing experience for parents. And they are told that their child should eat a certain way. And when their child doesn't, the research has told us, I love qualitative research that looks at experiences of people who go through different things. So in this case, having children with feeding challenges, what we know about the research on moms is that mothers, having a child with feeding challenges impacts a mother's self-concept and whether she perceives herself to be a good mother. And I should say most of the research thus far has been done on mothers, but we're starting to get some about fathers and more diverse family structures. But I think we can take that information and apply it to any parent we meet who comes to us and isn't able to help their child eat. It's so central to our identity. So it looks different at different stages. But, my hope is that some of the information I put out there can help parents first start to accept and understand their child where they are now and today and start from a place of, connection and support.
And it may be new information to the person listening that a speech language pathologist would help their child with feeding.
You're so right.
That was new to me. Like, I was like, oh, wait, we can do that. And it was amazing, like learning about textures and about so much variety that you don't think about. Well, it's the last week of August, and in Texas, that means it is the temperature of the surface of the sun. And whether I am going to a fancy 50-year-old wedding anniversary party or pick up from school, I need to be comfortable as I sprint from my house to my car to whatever event because I'm sweating so bad. Y'all, it's a situation. And I want to look cute. So y'all know that I'm a big fan of Honey Love because as I'm dealing with this hot, sweaty sitch, I also want to be comfortable and supported, okay? So I have absolutely loved, it is my go-to, reach for first if it's clean, bra. And if you haven't checked them out, I'm going to tell you, you have to. The Honey Love crossover bra is so comfortable. It gives all the support of the traditional bras. There's no underwire. There's this cute mesh detailing, which Cynthia gives me a hard time about. And it doesn't have the back bulging. We all know what that means. It has this smoothing fabric. And they even have like a lounge bra if you need some for around the house. You have older teens. It's the V bra. And it doesn't stop there. They even have shapewear that I've worn with fancy dresses, tanks, leggings, so many options. Honey Love has you covered from everyday looks, workouts, weddings, more. Whatever you need in your life, there's no sacrificing. You have earned it. So moms, Honey Love is not just supporting women, it's empowering women. So treat yourself to the best bra on the market. Save 20% off at honeylove.com/DMA. Use our exclusive link to get 20% off. That's how they know. honeylove.com/DMA. Find your perfect fit. After you purchase, they're going to ask you, where did you hear about them? Please support our show. Tell them that we sent you. Elevate your comfort, elevate your style with bras that empower your lifestyle of flexibility. Let's move in though. Let's say for the parent listening, feeding is not a challenge for them, but the next level of connection is that communication.
Mm-hmm.
And we think about first words like dada, mama, but there's so much communication prior to that. Can we talk about the nonverbal communication for a second that are the building blocks of verbal communication so that parents can be looking for it with their less than 1-year-old right now?
I love that you brought this up. I don't know how you knew or how you have this perfect timing, but I just finished the manuscript. One of the books that's going to be coming out next year is focused entirely on helping parents teach their children gestures, their babies.
Okay.
Because what we know is that, yes, you're absolutely right. Gestures are a building block of communication. So for those of you listening, a gesture is a movement that we make, usually with our hands or our head or our face, that carries meaning. It can also be with our bodies. And we as speech pathologists know how important gestures are in supporting communication because it's one of the first ways that infants communicate meaning before they can form a word. So, and those early gestures, I think lots of parents know to look for things like clapping and waving and pointing and blowing kisses and putting our arms up and saying hooray.
The performative ones, like, hey, look at the new trick my baby can do. Yeah.
Exactly. And gestures really are a way that babies can indicate, oh, I'm starting to understand that we're sharing an experience together and we're thinking about the same thing. So when your baby starts to point, maybe they point at a dog running by and your baby is indicating, I understand that if I point to that dog, because it's so cute and I'm excited, that you're going to look and we're going to share attention around, what we see or something that we do. So gestures are so important, and we also know that a child's gesture use can predict their language abilities later. And so there's a lot of really good research around that. But I have an upcoming video where I share a tip. If there's like one takeaway tip I can share with your audience about gestures,
Yeah.
The research shows that one of the most powerful things we can do to support infants in language learning is when they gesture to name or describe the thing that they are doing or showing you. So, for example, if your little one points to an airplane in the sky, you can say, oh, there's an airplane. I see the airplane. What you're doing is helping to attach meaning to their gesture. And you are naming the thing that they're looking at. So then they start to learn the word for that thing that they're super interested in. And it's a really powerful, super easy thing to do that many of your listeners are probably doing anyway. But you also are following your child's lead, which is another research backed strategy that helps children learn language. We want to share our attention and teach kids words around the things that they are showing us that they're interested in and excited about.
And that's even a picture book. If you have one of those, like yours behind you, a picture book that has a lot of things on it. I love those really colorful ones.
Mm-hmm.
And you open it up and you see what they touch.
Mm-hmm.
And you see where they're looking and you talk about that instead of you leading the way. Because, it makes sense. Like whatever you're attuned to, you've given your attention, your interest is an indicator of where your brain is going to receive information. That makes sense to me. Yeah.
I'm so glad you said that because I think about a lot of parents in the past that have said to me, my child won't find pictures when I ask them. They just want to point to the pictures and have me name them. And we know because of our background that is your child trying to learn to understand new words and showing you what they're the most interested in. So I also hope that parents can hear that and feel a little less stressed that their child isn't necessarily performing or showing them things on demand, so to speak, but that they are doing so much in supporting their child's communication by just following their child's lead in a situation like book reading like that.
And I think I saw one of your videos where someone asked, like, they don't want to look at the pictures. They just want to open the book and keep turning the pages. That's huge. That's pre-reading. That's,
Mhm.
again, follow their lead. They love to open. That's a word. That's a verb. I mean,
Yep.
anyway, I think one thing you and I have learned, and I'll just say it instead of prompting you, is that they understand before they say. We say receptive over expressive. So if they're getting loaded, and they're having all that attachment of what they pointed to in a word, so many exposures to dog, and it's getting in their system as dog, then they can produce dog later, but they have to have all that. And that joint attention is what we call it, like looking at the same thing is such a huge building block
Yeah.
for that language learning process. So if you're wanting those first words, what Stephanie's saying is those are the building blocks. That's
You're so right.
it's
Yes,
not
exactly.
flashcards like tell me this, tell me this, tell me this, tell me this.
Mm.
That's not it. One thing I want to bring up, and I might be pivoting a little bit, is how you and I have our oldest babies going off to college.
Ah,
So we're
do
gonna
we
have a
have
moment
to?
of we're just gonna cry for a second.
I didn't bring tissues
No,
into my
we won't.
office for
We
this
won't. We won't
conversation.
overfeel, but I will tell you that tears have been coming in random times. And one was in the Walmart. I had all of like almost $700 worth of stuff from. That's
Oh my,
hard to do. Like I told the
yes.
guy leaving, I said, I think I just bought one of everything.
Yeah.
Um, but I'm in line. It's taking a little bit, and I can see in the next line there's a dad with two little kids, and one of them's in the child seat part, and he's starting to lose it, like we all want to. Like
Yes.
he's done. And the dad responded. He patted his back, which you don't always see, like a positive response to a kid crying in public. I get it, no judgment.
Mhm.
But then he kind of looks up and he's still kind of crying, and I smile real big, and we have this interchange, and he like looks away, and then he checks back to see if I'm still looking, and I like make a face, and then he does some with his hand, and I imitate him, and I do it, and then I end up covering my eyes and doing kind of a peekaboo, and then this big
Yeah.
smile across his face, and a totally different emotion, right, from him, and he looks up at his
Yeah.
dad and he smiles, and I start crying because
Oh my,
I'm not in that stage anymore. You
no.
know, I'm buying stuff for my college kid, and I just want to play peekaboo with the toddler. Anyway, there's our moment. Feel it. Feel it.
I told my husband, speaking of not being in that stage, I said to him the other day, and my husband, his name is Stephanie Cohen. He's a college life and college transition expert. He has a much larger platform than I do and has written several books.
Wait,
But
does he give tips online?
yes, yeah,
OMG, I just saved it today. That's your
excellent. Yes,
husband?
yeah.
He gave me a tip about how my son can make friends.
No way. I
It's
love it.
687. I don't even know.
Yeah,
That's your
yeah.
husband. Okay, so tell me about
So
your
that's my
husband.
husband. And he's this expert, right? He's giving everybody advice. And this is our
Yeah,
first
me.
child going off to college. And so I'm the one who's bursting into tears at random times. And he's the one with like, oh, well, we just need a plan and have your people on campus and your places and be patient. And I'm like, yes, I know the plan, but I feel like somebody took my life and took it away from me. And now I'm in this new place and nobody took my life away. Like, thank goodness my family's healthy. Everything
Yeah.
is fine.
Yeah.
But it's just so unfamiliar. And it feels like I turned around and it was different. And this is so cliche. Like I was thinking about you seeing the toddler and thinking, oh, it goes so fast. We're so cliche, but
So,
like it's so true. And so, anyway, it's a little disorienting. My friends and I are talking about it's just a little disorienting. So,
yeah, I like almost weeped again thinking of my three younger ones hugging him goodbye on
no,
Sunday. I
we're not
can't.
talking about that.
It's been
That's what made me cry the other night is
yeah.
my 11-year-old being without
Yes.
his big brother. And
Yeah.
yes,
It's been a unit for 12 and a half years, and that's a big deal.
yes,
But
it's a
back
big
to
deal.
speech.
Back to speech.
I was following his lead. I was imitating. Let's talk
Yes.
about imitation because that was something that was a speech language building block that I didn't know until I went to grad school. And I think it's super helpful, small little thing that parents can recognize, a skill that your kids need and a tool, a trick to engage
Yes.
a child. So talk to us about imitation.
So you're absolutely right. Imitation is how babies and toddlers learn pretty much everything. Some toddlers or babies and toddlers imitate in the moment. Some imitate like at a later time. And then babies imitate a whole variety of things, babies and toddlers. So they imitate actions, right? Like maybe you're driving a car along a surface or you're throwing a ball and your child sees, oh, that's what I do with that. Let me try and do that. Maybe you bang something on a surface and your baby imitates that. And it's just how they learn to do new things. We also, as imitation skills improve, start to imitate movements that carry meaning, like gestures. We start to imitate sounds, movements with our face and mouth. And then we start to imitate words. And so this is really this concept, this understanding of I see someone do something and I might be able to try and do it, is so important. And the tip I like to give parents, I always like to distill it down to here's like the super easy thing that you can do throughout your entire day. You don't have to do any homework. I'm not a speech pathologist that says, sit down for 30 minutes a day and do this homework because no one's got time for that.
Nobody.
Imitate your baby, imitate your toddler. That's all you have to do. If your baby makes a sound, make the sound. And it sounds so simple, but what you're doing is you're showing them, you're demonstrating, we imitate each other. And if you've ever done that to a baby or you did it with that toddler, you see them light up, right? Mm-hmm. They are like, oh, wow, this big person has done something that I did. Let me see if I can get them to do it again, right? Mm-hmm. And it's so motivating. And again, it's an example of meeting them where they are, right? So if you're trying to get your child to say dog, but maybe your baby or toddler is just starting to figure out how to growl, then we've got to meet them there and help them learn at their level. And then we can give them sort of some other ideas. So imitation really is so important throughout all stages of development. And it's something that every parent can support.
And I'll jump in with a little SLP, that stands for speech language pathology, fact.
Yeah.
When we say speech and language would be bada represents dog every single time. Bada, every time they see a dog. They're communicating consistently some sound combination for an object, and that can happen. Speech is they actually say a D, an ah, and a G, like dog, and we're trying to make sure they don't say gog or dod or something that's later. But if your baby has a consistent sound representation for an object, count it as a word. That's
Absolutely.
a word, So anyway, that's just a side note. Stephanie was talking about the challenges of feeding can often happen, and we get worried about our kids and their development and if they're getting enough food and if they're getting the right enough amount of vitamins. And I know even with my kids who are in their teen years, they often choose a lot of their food except for dinner. And I'm worried they're not getting the vitamins they need as they're growing so much. And then when I look at children's vitamins, so many of them are basically candy in disguise. So that's why Haya was created. It's a pediatrician approved, superpowered, chewable vitamin. Now, while most children's vitamins have like 5 grams of sugar and can lead to all kinds of other issues, including that gummy situation with the teeth and you're at the dentist, yada, yada, Haya is formulated with nutritional experts, and it is pressed with a blend of 12 organic fruits and vegetables. Then it's supercharged with 15 essential vitamins and minerals that includes vitamin D, which I know I am low on, B12, another great one, C, so we can keep those colds away, and zinc, also important, folate. This is going to help them with their immunity, their energy, their brain function, mood, teeth, all the things. It's non-GMO, vegan, dairy-free, allergy-free, gelatin-free, nut-free, everything else you can imagine, and it's designed for kids 2 and up. What's so fun is they give you this cute little glass jar that your kids can decorate. Mine put, of course, his little nickname on it that he and his buddies have for him, Nomit. And then they resend you in a really slim packaging more of the chewables every month, so you don't run out. I just got my refills in the mail this week. You should definitely also check out their new kids probiotic and nighttime essentials. I know one of my boys especially is big on needing that. So we've worked out a special deal with Haya for their best-selling children's vitamin. Receive better. Receive 50% off your first order. To claim this deal, you must go to hiyahealth.com/DMA. This deal is not available on their regular website, so you have to go to Hiya. It's spelled HIYA health, HEALTH.com/DMA. Get your kids the full body nourishment they need to grow into healthy adults. With imitation, and you were saying the baby makes a sound and you make a sound and it makes them feel heard. What do you say to people who are like saying not to do baby talk, right? Like
You
if you
just
only
read my
do,
mind.
yeah, if you only do baby talk, then they won't learn to talk.
So I am not the therapist that will tell you, here's the hard and fast rule. Don't do this bad thing. Because baby talk, so there's a little bit of a differentiation here. So most parents, when they talk to their babies, use what we call parent ease, or it used to be called mother ease, which is kind of talking like Miss Rachel, like, hi, baby, how are you? And we talk like that because babies' brains are programmed to light up and engage with a sing-song intonation, exaggerated emotion, and just lots of expression, right? And so some people think that's baby talk. It's not.
Mhm.
What I think most people have come to understand and call baby talk is what is the example you just gave, or saying words in like the wrong way. So, like, oh, are those your toesy woesies? Some speech pathologists would say, no, 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 we don't say toesy woesies. You know what? I used words like that when I was loving on and interacting with my babies, and that is just natural. So I think we don't need to be so stressed, but we can recognize that our children are not going to speak using those types of words forever, and eventually they will learn the accurate production of words. So to connect with the example you just gave, my oldest used to call strawberries uptigas. I have no idea why, but I called strawberries uptigas for probably 4 years.
Yep.
And a speech pathologist who's a little more maybe rule based than I am would say, oh, that's not the right thing to do. You know what? Those words are so darn cute that, like, enjoy them, love them, use them. And I just think that, like, it's the stakes are not high. You know what I mean?
Totally. And I don't know if that's the one. He's going to college, right? It's going to be okay.
He does not call strawberries up to us now. He's going to
Totally.
college. He's very bright, very successful. And so,
Yeah.
again, no hard and fast rules, but you know you're modeling accurate production of words sort of all day long. So please do not stress if you derive joy from using
Yeah.
those cute little sort of baby words.
It's that connection again. You know
Yes.
what that means. I found an old document of when we went on a trip for my second son's, the baby moon for my second son. And I had my in-laws watching, or my parents, I don't know. Anyway, it was like a vocab breakdown, like my own dictionary. Like when he says this, like HCK, it means fire truck. When he, like all of the little things. Like he would make up his own, like this was dance, like more sign language. Let's talk about sign language.
Sure. I'd love to.
We talked about gestures.
We did.
So if an approximation of a word is okay, and even if you reuse it with them, what about sign language? Will it delay their speech? Will it keep them from using verbal communication if you do some signs about instead of words, like water?
Yeah. So I think there's a couple of pieces to this conversation. The short answer is no. The research that we have has shown us that using single signs or meaningful gestures that a child has come up with, like the little dance gesture that you just showed me, it does not delay communication. And the reason why is because it is a successful way of communicating a message. So we know when kids feel successful, connected, and understood, they're more motivated, right?
Yep.
I was listening to one of your episodes where you talked about intrinsic motivation, and that really resonates with me because I want to understand what a child is intrinsically motivated to communicate about. And if they want to talk about dancing or communicate about dancing, and that's the gesture, then we're going to take it. The other piece of this conversation is you and I both know American Sign Language is an actual language with its
Totally.
own set of, grammatical and syntax rules, and it is used by a large group of people. So when we talk about using signs with infants and toddlers, I think it's important to make that distinction that we're not teaching American Sign Language unless, of course, we're working with someone who uses that and that's their first language. But what we are doing is maybe borrowing some single signs to just support a child who is a verbal communicator or whose family communicates using their voices. But to distill it down, I think the important takeaway message is it supports communication. I like to think about it as just more tools in the toolbox. If your child in that moment doesn't have access to saying the word more, like maybe they can say it sometimes, but in this moment, they're so hungry and they just want more. And what they can do in that moment is sign, then we take it because they're communicating the best way that they know how and they're doing the best they can in that moment.
Yes. Let's talk about mama versus dada.
Yes. So,
Why would some kids, when you ask them to say mama, they only say dada? And then for others, you ask them to say dada, they only say mama. Like, what's going on there?
this is probably the question I get asked most frequently in my DMs and in my emails and in my sessions with families is why is my child saying dada first? And so there's been some research on this over the years. I don't think we have a firm conclusion, but some of the things that have come up are the ideas that infants don't necessarily perceive themselves as separate people from their moms if mom is the primary caregiver. So, for the sake of this conversation, we
Yeah.
acknowledge there are lots of different family structures.
Totally.
But for many kids, mom is the primary caregiver. And so it's the process developmentally of a child, an infant, perceiving themselves as a separate and distinct person versus if it's a mother and a father in the family, dada is usually first perceived as a separate person. Also, I think a lot about the fact that mama doesn't do a whole lot of saying the word mama to refer to herself, but we do talk about dada. Dada is not home. Dada is coming home. Dada is here. So the frequency with which infants hear that word also makes a difference. So I think there are a multitude of different factors. Both M's and D's are what we think about as early developing sounds. And the reason for that is because for M's, you can see them, right? And D's are also produced in the front of the mouth. But we know that those sounds are part of the group of consonant sounds that most babies produce early on. So it's going to be either mama or dada, but I think the jury's still out specifically and concretely why dada is first, but those are some of the answers. And there are some studies that have shown that across cultures, the word for dada does emerge slightly before mama, even though both of those are early developing words. So I think we just need a little more research to have like
It's not
the final
personal,
answer.
is what you're saying. And if it
Yes,
is the whole like they see themselves as one with you, I mean, that makes sense. Like, yeah, especially if you are the
absolutely.
primary feeder, whatever way you choose to feed.
Yeah.
Okay. What is another common question that you get?
I get a lot of questions about milestones.
Yeah.
When should my child say their first word? When should they drink from a cup? How many words should my child have? That is a big one alongside the helping my child say mama or dada, the number of words at a certain age. The American Speech Language Hearing Association this past year put out a new set of milestones. And I've talked about those in depth online. And the way I think about milestones and like the number of words we should expect kids to have is that it must be thought about as a range. And we must think about a child as an individual. And I talk to a lot of parents and say, I'm really more interested in the pattern of development versus does your child have, 20 words at 15 months? If your child only has a handful of words, but they're imitating everything all day long and they're adding words regularly, that to me is the more significant factor than the number of words on your list. So the vocabulary size, the number of words is always a big question. And then a lot of parents ask me questions about how to get their kids to eat different foods. That's another big one too, again, because I think of all the messaging we get about this ideal that if your child tries everything and eats, everything you offer, then that's the goal. And so I talk a lot about the fact that there is no one goal. There's no one goal for how mealtime should look, how your child's diet should look. And so it's a more nuanced conversation.
I can imagine someone's thinking, they're like, okay, when should they have their first I just remember because we have an actual test, right? Like we can decide, we can see, like, is your child falling within the normal range of development? Are they outside the
Mhm.
normal range when it comes to speech, when it comes to language?
Yep.
And I remember there was one item that was like, your baby can vocalize without moving their body. And every time I see a new baby and they like coo and their arms go like, it makes me laugh because I'm like, they're not in that stage yet where they can vocalize and not move their whole body. Like there's so
I
many
love it.
little parts of speech and language development that as the non-therapist, you're not even noticing, like averting eye contact when they're stressed. Like so much communication is happening in that baby. But for the sake of the world, what is that age for the first word? What's the
So the
range of normal?
milestone,
Yeah.
yeah, the
Mhm.
milestone that ASHA cites, and they came up with these milestones by looking at a number of studies and really looking at like, are these actually good studies?
Yeah. Yeah.
Are we using the information that's actually accurate? And they look at when do 75% of kids do a certain skill or demonstrate a certain skill. So the number they put out is that 12-month olds, 75% of 12-month olds have between 2 and 5 words. So if we think about that, we have to recognize that 25% of 12-month olds either have more or fewer. But that's the one to kind of keep in the back of your mind. 2 to 5 words at 12 months. And what counts as a word? What counts as a word is, of course, words pronounced correctly, but also words pronounced incorrectly, like you gave the example of earlier. Sign, using a sign, right? So if your child is signing more, that counts as a word. And animal sounds, we count animal sounds as words too. So
It's good. That
maybe
is all
some
good
parents out
information.
there.
I know we need to go soon, but for the mom who's worried,
Yes.
at what point, if there's not an obvious diagnosis at birth or that the pediatrician's following up on, at what point should a parent reach out to an early intervention therapist for help?
So the thing I love about the early intervention program is that anyone can request an evaluation at any time and it's free. And if we think about this in the context of the conversation we've had today and what you share with your listeners, we know how much stress and anxiety impacts our relationship with our kids and our parenting, just our day to day functioning. I personally believe that if you are worried, if your instincts are telling you like something's off, or even if you think something could be off, but you're not sure, please use the resource. If you Google early intervention and the name of your state, usually the first result will be the contact information. It's not called early intervention in every state and territory. But if you Google those two search terms, you will find the program in your area and you can call and say, I would like an evaluation. Because even if you get the evaluation and your child doesn't qualify for the program, you will still leave with information and you will be empowered with knowledge. And we always share tips with parents in our evaluations. And it's just nice to have somebody to ask your questions to who's really an expert. Pediatricians are incredible, but we obviously have talked about that there's so much more to language and communication than just the number of words. And so I think that if parents feel stress and worry, that they should reach out. I see babies under 6 months. I see them in the newborn stage. That's usually if there's sort of a known issue. But we talk about communication very early on. So use the resources that are out there to support your family.
And y'all, I mean, it's earlier always is great. And there is a connection we've found with our speech and our language and reading and learning, and it's all interwoven. And so if there's any motivation, yes, don't be stressed, but definitely something like there are resources out there and there are people that will help you. And even if they're borderline, like they're on the edge of it being an actual issue or not, why not get tools like Stephanie shares every day on social media to support your child in the you will do more help with your child in the moment to moment than we could ever do in a 30-minute session twice a week. So
Absolutely.
get those skills, get that learning. Y'all are such amazing moms, even and dads, for listening to this episode. So you already get an A+ gold star for the day. Before you go, we're going to put links to everything and to all your amazing books. But do you want to tell us, like, you have a book behind you, Learn to Talk book. You even have these tools that parents could be their own their own little, not therapists, it's support systems for their kids.
So this book series was born out of a desire to give parents tools that are so easy to use to support their child's development. Because as you said, parents are their own child's best teacher. We will never be able to teach your children as well as you do. And so in the books, I actually have 4 books that are out right now. So there's the My First Learn to Talk book, Things That Go, for my vehicle lovers out there. There's the I Can Say Mama book. So I love that we had that conversation. And the I Can Say Dada book, which are the first books focused on those words that have a spot for your picture, because we know the direct connection is so important.
That's cute.
And so there's a guide in the back that helps parents just understand like all of the research-backed strategies that we use to teach children to talk. But the books really are sort of therapy tools in disguise. And I am so grateful and thankful for all the positive feedback that I get every day about how many kids are imitating and saying new sounds and words. I am so excited for the next 2 books in this series. There's actually 5 more in the pipeline, but the one coming out in October is I Can Say Goodnight. And it is basically a social story, like you were talking about before. Yeah. It's a bedtime routine in pictures with sounds and words that your little one can use throughout that routine. So my hope is to make that routine a little more fun, a little more efficient, and less stressful. And then in the spring, the I Can Say Moo book is coming out, which, as you might be able to guess, is a farm theme. So those are available for pre-order online, Barnes & Noble, Target, Amazon, independent booksellers. And I'm just so excited for the next ones to land on families' doorsteps or in your bookstores, in your libraries.
Yes. And I love you said that, because that was another building block we didn't get to, but you said it, is the routines are such a great place to start with that vocabulary bombardment, and just like getting that sameness is helpful for learning. So I love that. And the animal sounds, when I did cochlear implant rehabilitation, that's like our go-to first start of how to attach sound to meaning, and it's motivating. So whatever your kid is drawn to, create a sound so they can start attaching meaning to sound, and pausing, the power of the pause.
That's what I talk about. At the end of these books, the other thing that I will just sneak in is the other thing that folks might not realize is on each page is a simple picture of an infant or toddler to pair with the sound or word on each page, the target, we call it. The child's mouth matches the position that we actually use to produce those sounds and words. So your child's hearing you, their brains are seeing a mouth or a face in that right position. So we're really bombarding them with all the info they need to be able to say these new words. So I'm very excited.
So smart. And the real pictures, because they're always down to a real photo. So you're so smart, Stephanie. So excited to connect everybody with you and your husband. I'm going to put his link in there too, because for us grieving college, sending off moms, we need his help. Makes me feel better. Yes. I'm always like sending it to my son. Like, I know. So thank you for joining me today. So helpful. Loved it.
This has been a great conversation. Thank you.
That was so fun for me. Y'all, it's like a whole part of my brain that I forget that I know things, and then that we had the same professors. Oh, we just had such a great conversation. Loved that. Definitely, like I've said before, check out her Instagram, her YouTube if you need additional support, or you just want to learn. Or maybe you're like, hey, maybe I'll go back and become a speech language pathologist. This is a fun topic. I was such a fan of My Fair Lady and learning sign language and languages and all the things. And anyway, speech language pathology was such a fun career for me. So I'm going to pray for us, because this may not have been fun for you. This may have been hard, because this is a hard part of your journey as a parent. And so we are going to surrender that and feel God's peace in this particular area. Lord, I thank you for the amazing design you put into our brains for babies to learn the language of wherever they are, whether they're born in Asia, Russia, Africa, that based on their interactions with the adults around them, they learn a language, which is so amazing, Lord. And that you design communication as part of a way for us to connect with one another. And that you, God, Jesus, you are the Word. And you became flesh and you dwelt among us. And words matter to you. You spoke and the world came into being. And I pray for the moms who are worried and are concerned about their child's development right now. They are longing for their child to call them by name, to understand what they are communicating, and their heart is breaking. I pray that you would be their ever-present peace, that you would be the reminder that you are the creator, God, and that you have not left their side, and that there are resources and that there are tools and there are ways to connect, and that even if their child is on a different path and it's not the expected path, that you have not forgotten them and that they are not alone and that they would find others on similar journeys in this different route, this different place they find themselves. I pray that for each of us, Lord, that we would center ourselves in who you are and not in comparing and contrasting to other people around us and how other kids are developing and our other kids' paths, that we can trust you for our kids and the journey they're on with you. In Jesus' name, amen. All right. Thanks, y'all, for joining me. I do hope you share this with someone if you know moms who have younger kids that could benefit. That would be awesome. And I will see you back here next week. I think we have, actually, I'm going to see you here on Friday it's the first Friday of the month, which means it's Sidetracked Friday. So join me here. Make sure you subscribe so you get that next episode popping right into your podcast feed. All right. Adios. Bye.
I hope you enjoyed this episode of the Don't Mom Alone podcast. If you're wanting to connect with more people and more resources to help remind you that you're not alone, head over to don'tmomalone.com. That's where you'll also find show notes with any links mentioned by our guests. Most importantly, I want you to know the good news. The great news that you're not alone because God has promised to always be with you. With faith in Jesus Christ, the one who died for you and rose again, Jesus said when he left, he was going to leave a helper, a comforter, to be with us. God in us. Moms, that's superpower. So while you're washing dishes at your kitchen sink, while you're driving to and from work, while you're feeding that baby late into the night, while you're cleaning sticky floors, God promises to be just as present with you as when you're worshiping in a church pew. As it says in Zephaniah 3:17, the Lord your God is with you. He is mighty to save. He takes great delight in you. He will quiet you with his love, and he will rejoice over you with singing. Now that's good news. Have a great day.